The small town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Life moved at a slow pace and people liked it that way. Gossip traveled faster than cars on the main road, and every family had its own reputation to uphold. In this quiet little town lived two sisters who couldn't have been more different from each other. The older sister was confident, outgoing, and always seemed to shine in any room she walked into. She had a way of making people feel important, like they mattered just because she noticed them. Her name didn't matter as much as the fact that she was the golden child, everyone's favorite. The younger sister, on the other hand, preferred staying in the background. She wasn't loud or flashy. Instead, she observed the world around her quietly, often feeling like an outsider even within her own family. For years, the younger sister had watched her older sibling get all the attention. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was more like a dull ache, a constant reminder that she would never measure up. No matter how hard she tried, it felt like she was invisible. Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, they all blurred together in a haze of comparisons. People would say things like, "Oh, you're so lucky to have such a talented sister," or "You must be so proud of her." And while those comments weren't meant to hurt, they left behind tiny scars that added up over time. When the news came that the older sister was getting married, excitement rippled through the town. The groom was handsome, successful, and well-liked, a perfect match according to everyone. The wedding was going to be the event of the year, held at a beautiful vineyard just outside the city. Invitations were sent out weeks in advance, and the younger sister received hers with mixed feelings. On one hand, she loved her sister deeply and wanted to celebrate her happiness. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't quite belong in this picture-perfect world her sibling had created. The day of the wedding arrived, and the younger sister put on her best dress, a simple yet elegant outfit she had saved up for months to buy. She spent extra time doing her hair and makeup, wanting to look presentable without drawing too much attention to herself. As she drove to the venue, her stomach churned with nerves. Would anyone notice if she stayed in the corner? Would her sister even miss her if she decided to leave early? When she arrived at the vineyard, the scene took her breath away. Twinkling fairy lights hung from trees. Tables were set with crisp white linens and fresh flowers, and soft music played in the background. It was everything a dream wedding should be. Guests mingled happily, laughing and sipping champagne as waiters carried trays of hors d'oeuvres. But as the younger sister stepped inside the reception hall, her heart sank. The seating chart stood. Near the entrance, a large board displaying names written in elegant calligraphy. She scanned the list nervously, searching for her name. When she finally found it, her chest tightened. Instead of being seated near the family table, or even close to her sister, she was placed at the very back of the room, next to strangers, whose names she didn't recognize. At first, she tried to convince herself it was no big deal. Maybe it was just a mistake. Or maybe there hadn't been enough space at the main tables. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't an accident. Someone had made a deliberate choice to seat her far away, as if she didn't deserve to be part of the inner circle. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she imagined what the other guests might think. Did they assume she wasn't close to her sister? Did they wonder why she was stuck in the back? The thought of sitting there, pretending everything was fine, felt unbearable. Before anyone could see her reaction, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly against the stone pathway. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. The weight of years of feeling overlooked pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than ever before. Tears welled up in her eyes as she hurried away from the laughter and music, leaving behind the glittering celebration. As she reached the edge of the property, the noise faded into the distance. The cool evening air brushed against her face, offering a small comfort. She glanced back once, half expecting someone to come running after her, calling her name. But no one did. In that moment, she realized something painful yet freeing. No one had even noticed she was gone. The younger sister walked aimlessly, her feet carrying her farther and farther away from the vineyard. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, all tangled together like a knot she couldn't untie. The tears came freely, now streaming down her cheeks as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. How could her own family treat her this way? Was she really that invisible? She didn't know where she was going, but the path ahead seemed to beckon her. The cool night air wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, even though her heart felt heavy. The glow of the fairy lights at the wedding venue faded into the distance, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the chirping of crickets. It was peaceful out here, away from the noise and the stares, or lack thereof, that had made her feel so small. As she wandered deeper into the woods surrounding the vineyard, the world began to change. The manicured lawns gave way to wild grasses, and the neatly trimmed hedges turned into towering trees with branches that twisted toward the sky. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows on the ground. She wasn't scared exactly, but there was a sense of unease. A part of her wondered if she was making a mistake by venturing so far alone. But then, something caught her eye. A faint, golden light flickered in the distance, barely visible through the trees. At first, she thought it might be her imagination playing tricks on her, but as she moved closer, the light grew brighter. Curiosity overtook her fear, and she followed it, her steps quickening despite herself. The source of the light turned out to be a small cabin nestled among the trees. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, and the faint sound of classical music drifted through an open window. It was cozy and inviting, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the wedding venue she had left behind. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure whether she should approach or turn back. But the warmth emanating from the place drew her in, and before she knew it, she found herself standing on the doorstep. She knocked softly, half expecting no one to answer, but after a few seconds, the door creaked open to reveal an elderly man sitting by the fire. He looked up at her with kind eyes, his face lined with age but glowing with a quiet wisdom. His thick glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, and he held a book in his hands which he set aside when he saw her. "Well, well," he said, his voice gentle and warm. "What brings you out here on such a fine evening?" She blinked, taken aback by his calm demeanor. I'm not sure," she stammered, suddenly aware of how ridiculous she must look, teary-eyed and disheveled, standing in the middle of the woods. "I was just walking." The man smiled knowingly, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "You look like you could use a cup of tea." Grateful for the invitation, she stepped inside. The cabin was small but charming, filled with books stacked haphazardly on shelves and little knickknacks scattered around. A kettle whistled softly on the stove, and the smell of herbs wafted through the air. It felt like stepping into another world, one that was safe and unhurried. He handed her a steaming mug of tea and gestured for her to sit by the fire. She sank into the chair, feeling the tension in her body begin to ease. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the distant hum of nature outside. But eventually, the silence became too much for her to bear. "I shouldn't have come here," she blurted out, setting the mug down on the table beside her. "I don't even know why I'm here." The man chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling. "Sometimes we end up where we're meant to be, even if we don't realize it at first." His words struck a chord, and without meaning to, she began to pour out her story. She told him about growing up in the shadow of her older sister, always, feeling like she wasn't good enough. She talked about the wedding, the seating arrangement, and the overwhelming sense of rejection that had driven her to leave. As she spoke, the tears came again, but this time they felt different. Not bitter, but cleansing. To her surprise, the man listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When she finally ran out of words, he leaned back in his chair and sighed thoughtfully. "You know," he said slowly, "life has a funny way of teaching us who we are. Sometimes it takes being pushed aside to realize that we deserve more than what others give us." His words hung in the air, simple yet profound. She nodded, unsure of how to respond. He went on to share stories of his own life, how he had once been overlooked and underestimated, only to discover his true worth later on. By the time their conversation ended, she felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. Before she left, the man handed her a leather-bound journal. "Take this," he said with a smile. "It might help you find your way." Confused but intrigued, she accepted the journal and thanked him. As she walked back toward the vineyard, the journal tucked under her arm, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. The next morning, the younger sister woke up with a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. The journal the elderly man had given her sat on the bedside table, its worn leather cover calling out to her. She couldn't stop thinking about him, his calm demeanor, his wise words, and the way he seemed to understand her without judgment. But more than anything, she was curious about the journal. What was in it? Why had he given it to her? And what did he mean when he said it might help her find her way? After getting dressed, she picked up the journal and opened it carefully, almost reverently. The pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting inside was delicate yet firm, as if the writer had been determined to leave their mark. Each entry was dated, spanning years of someone's life. There were sketches scattered throughout, small drawings of flowers, landscapes, and faces, and snippets of poetry that spoke of dreams, heartbreak, and resilience. As she flipped through the pages, she began to piece together the story of the person who had written it. Her name was Eleanor, and from what she could gather, she had lived a life full of passion and struggle. Eleanor wrote about wanting to be an artist when everyone around her expected her to settle down and marry. She talked about standing up to her family, only to face their disapproval and eventual rejection. She poured her heart into her art, using it as a form of rebellion and self-expression, even though no one seemed to appreciate it at the time. The entries painted a vivid picture of a woman who refused to conform, who chased her dreams despite the odds stacked against her. But they also revealed her loneliness, her frustration, and her moments of doubt. Reading Eleanor's words felt like stepping into her shoes, seeing the world through her eyes. It was heartbreaking and inspiring all at once. Just as she reached the final pages of the journal, something fell out. A faded photograph. She picked it up and turned it over, her breath catching in her throat. In the picture, a young woman stood smiling brightly, her arm linked with two other people. One of them was unmistakably Claire, the older sister, looking much younger but still radiant. The other was Daniel, the groom from the wedding. They looked happy, carefree, and completely unaware of the weight of the moment captured in the photo. But what shocked her most was the resemblance between the young woman in the photo and Eleanor. The same features, the same confident stance. It didn't take long for the realization to hit her. This was Eleanor herself. She must have been Claire's grandmother and Daniel's great-aunt. How had she never heard of her before? Why had her existence been erased so completely? Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. Growing up, she had always known her family valued tradition and appearances above everything else. They prided themselves on being respectable, on maintaining a certain image. Could it be that Eleanor's choices, her refusal to follow the rules, her dedication to art, had been too scandalous for them to accept? Had they chosen to forget her entirely rather than acknowledge her contributions or forgive her defiance? Determined to find answers, she decided to confront her family. She tucked the journal and the photograph into her bag and headed back to the vineyard. The wedding celebrations were still going on, though they had shifted into a more relaxed phase. People lounged around tables, chatting and laughing as the afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the scene. She scanned the crowd until she spotted Claire, sitting with Daniel under a canopy of twinkling lights. Approaching them made her nervous, but she knew she couldn't back down now. "Hey," she said softly, drawing their attention. When Claire looked up, her expression shifted from surprise to concern. "What's wrong?" Claire asked, noticing the seriousness in her sister's voice. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled out the journal and the photograph. "Do you know who this is?" she asked, holding the picture up for them to see. Claire frowned, studying it closely. Then her eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, isn't that Grandma Eleanor?" "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. But why have I never heard of her? Why does it feel like she's been erased from our family's history? Claire exchanged a glance with Daniel, looking uncomfortable. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Finally, Claire sighed and gestured for her to sit down. It's complicated, she admitted. Eleanor, she didn't exactly fit into the mold our family wanted her to. She pursued art instead of marriage, and that caused a lot of tension. Eventually, she cut ties with everyone, and after she left, we just stopped talking about her. Stopped talking about her? She echoed, incredulous. You mean you erased her? You acted like she never existed. It wasn't supposed to be like that, Claire said quickly, her tone defensive. We thought moving on was easier than dealing with the pain of losing her. But maybe we were wrong. Maybe forgetting wasn't the right thing to do. The conversation went on for a while, each revelation hitting her harder than the last. She learned that Eleanor had been incredibly talented, but her work had been dismissed as frivolous by their grandparents. She discovered that Eleanor had written letters to the family over the years, letters that were either ignored or thrown away. And she realized that her own struggles to feel seen and valued weren't unique. They were part of a pattern that stretched back generations. By the time she left Claire and Daniel, her head was spinning. She felt angry, sad, and overwhelmed, but also strangely empowered. Eleanor's story had given her a new perspective. It wasn't just about being forgotten. It was about reclaiming what mattered. If her family wouldn't remember Eleanor, then she would do it herself. That night, as she lay in bed clutching the journal, she made a decision. She would honor Eleanor's memory by sharing her story with the world. Somehow she would bring her back into the light, not just for Eleanor's sake, but for her own. The next morning, the younger sister woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Eleanor's journal still lay on her bedside table, its pages filled with stories of courage and resilience. The photograph of Eleanor, Claire, and Daniel sat beside it, a constant reminder of the woman who had been erased but whose spirit refused to stay hidden. She knew what she had to do. She had to bring Eleanor's story back to life. Her first step was to dig deeper into Eleanor's past. She started by searching online for any mention of her work or legacy. At first, it seemed like Eleanor had truly vanished from history. There were no articles, no records, nothing that hinted at the vibrant life she had led. But then, she remembered something Claire had mentioned during their conversation. Eleanor's art had once been displayed in local galleries before being tucked away and forgotten. Determined to uncover those pieces, she reached out to distant relatives and friends of the family, asking if they knew anything about Eleanor's artwork. Most of them dismissed her questions or claimed they didn't remember much. But one elderly aunt, after some hesitation, admitted that there might be boxes of Eleanor's belongings stored in an old attic. No one's touched them in decades, the aunt said over the phone. But if you're really interested, I suppose you can take a look. Excited yet nervous, she drove to the aunt's house later that week. The attic was dusty and dimly lit, filled with forgotten treasures from generations past. After hours of sifting through crates and trunks, she finally found what she was looking for, a collection of paintings, sketches, and letters tied together with faded ribbon. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped the bundle, revealing canvases covered in bold colors and intricate details. Each piece told a story, capturing moments of joy, pain, rebellion, and hope. As she examined the artwork, she couldn't help but feel a deep connection to Eleanor. It was as if the older woman was speaking directly to her through these creations, urging her not to give up, not to let herself be silenced. Inspired, she decided to organize an exhibition, a tribute to Eleanor's talent and determination. At first, the idea seemed overwhelming. She had no experience planning events, let alone something as ambitious as an art show. But she reminded herself of Eleanor's courage and pushed forward anyway. She began by reaching out to local galleries and community centers, explaining Eleanor's story and sharing photos of the artwork. To her surprise, many people were eager to help. One gallery owner, moved by her passion, offered to host the event free of charge. Others volunteered their time and resources, helping her design posters, arrange displays, and spread the word. As the weeks passed, the exhibition began to take shape. She spent countless hours researching Eleanor's life, piecing together fragments of her story to share with visitors. She also included quotes from the journal, printing them on large boards that would guide people through the exhibit. Every detail mattered: the lighting, the layout, the music playing softly in the background. She wanted the space to feel alive, as if Eleanor herself were walking among the guests. Finally, the day of the exhibition arrived. The gallery was transformed into a stunning homage to Eleanor's life and work. Paintings hung elegantly on the walls, each accompanied by a brief description of its significance. Sketches lined the tables, showcasing her skill and creativity. In one corner, a slideshow played, featuring photographs of Eleanor alongside excerpts from her journal. The air buzzed with anticipation as people trickled in, drawn by curiosity and word-of-mouth excitement. Emily stood near the entrance, greeting guests and answering questions. At first, she felt nervous, unsure how people would react. But as she watched them move through the space, she saw something incredible happening. Strangers paused in front of the paintings, their faces reflecting awe and admiration. Some whispered to each other, sharing their thoughts about the art. Others lingered silently, clearly moved by what they saw. Claire and their mother showed up later in the evening, hesitating near the doorway as if unsure whether they belonged. Emily spotted them immediately and walked over, her heart pounding. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Claire stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything. For ignoring. Eleanor, for treating you the way we did. I had no idea how much pain we caused." Emily nodded, too choked up to respond right away. She had waited so long to hear those words, but now that they were here, she felt only relief, not anger or bitterness. After a moment, she hugged her sister tightly, letting go of years of resentment in that single embrace. Their mother joined them soon after, apologizing too. She explained that hiding Eleanor's story had been a mistake, born out of fear and pride. "We thought we were protecting you girls," she said, her voice breaking. "But maybe remembering is better than forgetting." The three of them talked, for hours that night, opening up in ways they never had before. They shared memories, regrets, and hopes for the future. For the first time, Emily felt truly seen, not as the overlooked younger sibling, but as someone worthy of love and respect. By the end of the evening, the gallery was packed. People from all walks of life had come to celebrate Eleanor's legacy, proving that her story resonated far beyond her immediate family. As Emily stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by laughter, tears, and heartfelt conversations, she realized something profound. This wasn't just about honoring Eleanor. It was about breaking cycles. By bringing Eleanor's story to light, she had shown her family, and herself, that it was okay to embrace imperfections, to celebrate individuality, and to value honesty over appearances. Emily couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor. She felt a strange connection to the woman she had never met, but whose words and art now filled her mind. It was as if Eleanor's story had been waiting for someone like Emily to find it. A person who could finally bring her back into the light. Determined to honor Eleanor's memory, Emily decided to take action. She started by digging deeper. The old journal gave her clues, names of galleries, letters addressed to friends, and even mentions of exhibitions Eleanor had once held. With this information, Emily tracked down some of Eleanor's surviving artwork. Most of it had been locked away in dusty storage units owned by distant relatives who didn't care much about it anymore. But when Emily saw those paintings and sketches, she was blown away. Each piece told a story of pain, joy, rebellion, and hope. They were raw, emotional, and full of life. Emily knew these artworks deserved to be seen. So, she came up with an idea. Why not organize an exhibition? At first, the thought terrified her. She wasn't an expert on art, nor did she have any experience organizing something like this. But something inside pushed her forward. Maybe it was Eleanor's spirit guiding her, or maybe it was just the realization that she finally had a purpose bigger than herself. She reached out to local galleries and community centers, explaining Eleanor's story and showing them photos of the artwork. To her surprise, many people were eager to help. One gallery owner, moved by Emily's passion, offered to host the event for free. Others volunteered their time and resources to make it happen. Slowly but surely, everything started falling into place. As the day of the exhibition approached, Emily grew nervous. What if no one showed up? What if people didn't care about Eleanor's story? These doubts haunted her late at night, but during the day, she kept herself busy preparing for the big event. Finally, the day arrived. The gallery was transformed into a beautiful space, with Eleanor's paintings displayed elegantly on the walls. Quotes from her journal were printed on posters scattered throughout the room, giving visitors glimpses into her thoughts and dreams. When Emily walked in that morning, she felt a lump in her throat. It was surreal to see all her hard work come together. By evening, the gallery was packed. People from all walks of life had turned up. Friends, strangers, family members, and even some of Eleanor's old acquaintances. Many of them stood silently in front of the paintings, clearly moved by what they saw. Some whispered among themselves, sharing stories they remembered about Eleanor. Others simply stared, lost in thought. Claire and their mother were there too. At first they hesitated near the entrance, unsure of how to react. But as they moved through the gallery, reading the quotes and looking at the artwork, tears welled up in their eyes. For the first time, they truly understood the depth of Eleanor's talent and the injustice of how she had been treated. After spending some time alone, Claire finally approached Emily. Her voice trembled as she said, "I'm so sorry." Emily looked at her sister, surprised. "For what?" "For everything," Claire replied softly. "For seating you far away at my wedding, for ignoring your feelings all these years, and for letting our family forget someone as amazing as Eleanor." Emily didn't know what to say. She had waited so long to hear those words, but now that they were here, she felt only relief, not anger or resentment. After a moment, she hugged her sister tightly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Their mother joined them soon after, apologizing too. She admitted that hiding Eleanor's story had been a mistake. "We thought we were protecting you girls," she said, her voice breaking. "But maybe we were wrong. Maybe remembering is better than forgetting." The three of them talked for hours that night, opening up in ways they never had before. Emily learned more about her family's history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Claire confessed that she often felt trapped by expectations just like Emily did. Their mother revealed her own struggles growing up in such a strict household. It was messy and uncomfortable, but also incredibly healing. As the night wore on, Emily realized something important. This exhibition wasn't just about Eleanor, it was about breaking cycles. By bringing Eleanor's story to light, Emily had shown her family that it was okay to embrace imperfections, to celebrate individuality, and to value honesty over appearances. When the exhibition ended, Emily felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For years, she had felt invisible, overshadowed by Claire and burdened by her family's silence. Now she finally felt seen. Not because she had done anything extraordinary, but because she had stayed true to herself. Inspired by Eleanor's courage, Emily made a decision. She would leave Willow Creek behind and travel the country, collecting stories of women whose voices had been silenced. From artists to activists, teachers to homemakers, she wanted to document their lives and share them with the world. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. Before leaving, she visited Mr. Hawthorne one last time. He smiled knowingly when she told him her plans. "You found your path," he said, "now go walk it." With Eleanor's journal tucked safely in her bag, Emily boarded a bus bound for parts unknown. She didn't know exactly where she was headed, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer afraid of being forgotten, because sometimes the act of remembering others can help you rediscover yourself. The exhibition had been a turning point, not just for Emily, but for her entire family. For the first time in years, they had faced their past and begun to heal the wounds that had festered for generations. Claire and their mother had opened up about their own struggles, revealing layers of pain and regret that Emily had never imagined. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and awkward silences, but it was progress. And for Emily, that was enough. But as the days passed and life returned to its usual rhythm, Emily found herself restless. The exhibition had awakened something inside her, a hunger to do more, to keep uncovering stories that had been buried or forgotten. Eleanor's courage had inspired her, showing her what it meant to live authentically and fight for what mattered. Now she wanted to carry that spirit forward. One evening, as she sat on the porch of her small apartment, flipping through Eleanor's journal one last time, an idea began to form. What if she could travel the country, seeking out women like Eleanor, women whose voices had been silenced by society, circumstance, or even their own families? What if she could document their lives, share their stories, and remind the world of the power of remembering? At first, the thought seemed impossible. She had no experience as a writer or filmmaker, no connections in the world of storytelling. But then she remembered Eleanor's words from the journal. Sometimes you have to start before you're ready. Those simple yet profound words gave her the push she needed. She spent the next few weeks planning her journey. She saved up money, sold some of her belongings, and packed only the essentials into a single suitcase. Her laptop, a camera, and Eleanor's journal became her most treasured possessions. Before leaving, she visited Mr. Hawthorne, the elderly man who had given her the journal, and told him about her plans. He smiled knowingly, his eyes twinkling behind his thick glasses. "You've found your path," he said. "Now go walk it." His words stayed with her as she boarded a bus bound for parts unknown. She didn't have a clear destination in mind. She simply trusted that the road would lead her where she needed to go. Her first stop was a small town in the Midwest, where she heard about a woman who ran a community garden. Despite facing resistance from local authorities, the woman, now in her 70s, had spent decades feeding her neighbors and teaching children how to grow their own food. When Emily arrived, she was greeted with warm smiles and open arms. Over cups of tea, the woman shared her story, how she had fought against prejudice and poverty to create something beautiful and lasting. Emily listened intently, taking notes and snapping photos. By the end of their conversation, tears streamed down both their faces. "Thank you for listening," the woman said. "Not many people care about stories like mine." "I do," Emily replied firmly. "And I promise, I'll make sure others hear it too." From there, her journey took her across the country. She met artists who painted murals in abandoned neighborhoods, teachers who dedicated their lives to helping underprivileged students, and homemakers who quietly rebelled against societal expectations. Each story was unique, yet they all shared a common thread: resilience in the face of adversity. As she traveled, Emily posted updates on social media, sharing snippets of the stories she collected. At first, only a handful of people followed along, but slowly, her audience grew. Strangers began reaching out, sharing their own experiences or suggesting women she should meet. It was humbling to see how many people resonated with her mission. One day, while visiting a coastal town, she met a young woman who reminded her so much of herself. The girl was shy and unsure of her place in the world, often feeling overshadowed by her siblings. Emily sat with her for hours, encouraging her to embrace her individuality and reminding her that everyone has a story worth telling. "You don't have to be loud or perfect to matter," Emily told her. "Sometimes, being true to yourself is the bravest thing you can do." By the time Emily returned to Willow Creek months later, she was a different person. The weight of invisibility that had once crushed her was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. Her family welcomed her back with open arms, proud of the work she had done and eager to hear about her adventures. Claire hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You've changed everything for me, for Mom, for all of us." Emily smiled, knowing it wasn't just her who had changed. Her journey had sparked something in her family too. They had started talking openly about their feelings, supporting each other in ways they never had before. Even their mother had begun volunteering at a local charity, finding purpose in giving back to the community. As Emily unpacked her suitcase, she placed Eleanor's journal carefully on her bookshelf. It had been her guiding light throughout her travels, a reminder of where she came from and how far she had come. But now she realized it was time to let go, to trust that Eleanor's legacy would continue living on through the stories she had shared. Looking out the window at the familiar streets of Willow Creek, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. She knew she wouldn't stay long. There were still so many stories waiting to be told. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, to savor the moment. Because sometimes, the act of remembering others can help you rediscover yourself. And for Emily, that was the greatest gift of all.